Hey guys, Erin here. I just want to talk to you today about getting outside and enjoying the beautiful weather and taking your drawing pencils with you to create some landscape drawings. I want to introduce you to two different tools you can use to create more successful landscape drawings and create a lot of space in your landscape drawings. So we're going to learn how to use perspective in two different ways. The first way we're going to use perspective is we're going to use lines like this to create linear perspective. And then the next way we're going to use perspective is we're going to use different varying degrees of color to create atmospheric perspective. And you can use both of these tools simultaneously at the same time in one drawing, or you can use them separately, especially if you're practicing and you've never done these before. It's good to do them separately and then try to find a way to do them at the same time. And after you do that and you master that, you're going to be able to make really cool drawings of landscapes that have a lot of depth and space in them. And when you look at them, it's just going to pull you into the drawing. So I hope that you enjoy, and I hope that you can practice these and share them with your friends. Okay, let's get started on our linear perspective drawing. The things you're going to need are a ruler, a good pencil, and a good eraser, because you're going to be using the eraser a lot. With this drawing, we have to decide on two things. We have to decide where we are going to place the horizon line and where we are going to place the vanishing point. The vanishing point will always be somewhere on the horizon line, and that's really the main point of having the horizon line, is to determine how high or low on the paper the vanishing point will be, and also how far to the left or the right. If you want the street to go off to the left, sort of, then you'll have the vanishing point off to the left, and if you want the street to go off to the right, you'll put it over here somewhere. And if you want the street to look like it's just kind of going straight back, then you'll put it right in the middle. If you want the buildings to seem taller than you, then you want to place the horizon line kind of low on the paper. And if you want the buildings to seem like they are beneath you, you would actually place the horizon line high on the paper, because then the tops of the buildings can be seen. So let's get started. I'm going to place a horizon line. It's going to be similar to the first drawing we saw, so I'm going to actually place my horizon line kind of low, and I'm not going to make the horizon line really dark. It'll be a little difficult for you to see, but the other stuff I'll make sure to make really dark for you so that you can see it really well. So here's my horizon line, and I'm going to place my vanishing point somewhere over here to the left. I'm going to make that pretty big. And I'm going to make this street kind of feel like it's coming, like I'm standing on the left sidewalk. So I'm going to do the line at less of an angle on this side compared to the other side. I'm going to do kind of a long angle for the other side, much like you saw in the first picture I showed you. Okay, and since I'm closer to this side of the street, I'm going to make a sidewalk, but the sidewalk is going to be a lot wider on this side than it is on the other side. So I'm going to connect my ruler to the vanishing point and draw a line straight down. But for this side, I'm going to connect to the vanishing point, and I'm going to make the width on this side be smaller so that it seems like I'm further away from that side of the sidewalk. It's going to be kind of hard to draw this line with this kind of pencil. Okay, so that might even need to be a little bigger. Feels like it needs to be just a little bigger. And you can choose where you want to place the horizon line. It's up to you, and you can choose where you want to place the vanishing point, and you can choose pretty much everything about this drawing. You don't have to do the drawing the same way I'm doing it. This is just an example. So we're going to start out with drawing our first building, and it's usually easiest to start with the buildings that are closest to you, but you don't have to do it that way. You can always start out here too. We do know that the buildings that are closest to us are going to seem the largest, so they're going to seem the tallest as well as the widest. So I'm going to make a pretty tall, quite a bit higher than the horizon line. I'm going to make a vertical line. It goes to about right here, but you can choose where you want it to go to. The rules are the same no matter how you do it. And we're gonna do another vertical line somewhere, wherever we decide to place it. It will determine how wide the building is. So maybe we wanna do it right about here. Don't make this one super dark because you are gonna be erasing parts of it. So now you're gonna place your ruler, maybe the corner is best, right here at the vanishing point. And you're gonna rotate it up until the ruler crosses both vertical lines, and you're gonna draw a line between the two vertical lines so that the building connects, and you will erase this top line because it's not really there anymore. So this is the front of the building. Now, to create the back of the building, we need to do some horizontal lines. So we need the building to kind of go off to the right. And maybe it goes about this far, maybe it goes all the way off the page. It's just as far as you want it to go. You can make it up. That would be a very thin building, so I might make it go a little further than that. There wouldn't be a lot of space in that building. And you'll start to get to where you can tell how that building should look. So we'll go all the way down and connect it. But I've decided that we're also going to erase the horizon line first of all, because now you can't see that horizon line. This building is in between us and the horizon. So the horizon line is no longer a factor. We're also gonna do another building, maybe right here, that we can't even see the bottom of, and maybe it's shorter than that first building. So we're gonna do here. You could make it taller if you wanted to. You could go all the way up so that you can't even see the top of it. If you wanted to, you could go all the way off the page. You still just have to do a vertical line is the main thing. So we're gonna do it there. And we aren't gonna do a front corner. We're just gonna do the horizon line. So we'll go to the vanishing point, and then we'll find the top of our building and we'll draw a line. And since my ruler wasn't long enough, I'm just gonna make the line go as far as I can make it go, because I want this building to be going like off the page. So now I can erase everything in the middle there. Oops. Careful not to bend your page while you're erasing. It's good to tape the corners. I taped the top corners, but I didn't tape the bottom. Okay, so now I have two buildings there. Maybe I want to make a third building, and then we'll start to do some other stuff. So this building is so wide you can't even see the end of it. This one is about this wide, and the next building we want to make is going to be thinner, because as things go back, they're going to appear to get thinner and thinner and thinner, unless the building happened to be just really long. But we're not going to do that this time. We're going to make it be a little bit more normal. But you could do one like that where the building was really long. So I'm going to make another vertical line. And maybe this time, instead of making the second vertical line first, I might just go ahead and draw the vanishing point line. So I'll go ahead and connect this vanishing point to the top of this, and I'll create a really light line all the way down. And then I'll decide, where do I want to put the edge of this building? Do I want to put it here to make a really super long building? Do I want to make it thinner? I think I'm going to make it thinner than the previous one. So do a vertical line right here, and now I can erase that extra vanishing point line that goes beyond the building, as well as the horizon line. And I can put horizontal line here to show the side of the building. Another thing you can do is you can decide where you want to put the sun. Maybe it's, setting right here. Maybe it's up in the sky, but if it's on this side of the buildings, then that means that this side of the buildings is going to be darker than the front of the buildings. So you can create more depth by shading the sides of the buildings. So I'm going to shade this side just very lightly, and you could be a lot more particular about how you're shading it. I'm just doing it to show you. So there are 3 buildings there, and if we wanted to do a door on this one, we could draw a couple vertical lines here and here. and then connect to our vanishing point and connect those two vertical lines together. And then erase any extra lines that overlap. And you could do the same thing on this building. You could make a taller door, but most doors are probably about the same height, so we'll do a couple vertical lines. The door will be thinner on this building than it would be on this building because it's further away. So make these two vertical lines closer to each other, and then connect to the vanishing point so that you can connect the two vertical lines. Now when I did that, I made this door shorter. If I wanted this door to be the same proportions as the previous door, I would actually need to line it up with this line here. So if I rotate it and draw a new line, you'll see the difference from that to that. So maybe I do want the doors to be the same height. And maybe this is just a one-story building right here, because that's a pretty tall door. You might decide you want to shade the doors in just to have more contrast. A lot of times doors are painted darker, or maybe they're recessed, so they're like inset into the building a little so they're not catching the light. So here's some doors. If you want to do a window, it would be the same thing. Maybe this is a two-story building, so maybe we have, you know, a couple vertical lines here. I'm just going to freehand so I'm not blocking my drawing from you guys, but you can freehand if you're good at doing straight lines. But you shouldn't freehand the vanishing point line, because that one you're going to need to line up right. I'm going to make these closer to each other, because okay, so connect to the vanishing point to create the tops of these windows and the bottoms of these windows. Maybe I didn't make those lines long enough, but that's okay. So connect them so that they make a square, and then you can just erase the extra lines. If you wanted to make that cross shape that a lot of windows have, you still can have another vertical line in the middle. But you have to do the part that goes across with the vanishing point. So once again, connect to the vanishing point and draw a line kind of in the middle. There you go. So there's two windows, a couple doors. Another thing you can do is you can create power lines or street lights, and the only thing you have to do that is you have to know how tall to make them so that they look like they're receding in space. And so you can decide how tall you want to make them. I'm just going to make them a similar angle to this one. So while this angle is this way, I'm just going to kind of make a vanishing point line that goes this way. And all I'm going to do is do some vertical lines right about here, going down, and as space goes back, these lines will get closer and closer together. So as I go to the next one, I'll make it a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer until the lines are almost so close you can't tell. And we'll make some top horizontal lines for the power lines. And you can see how you can create space like so, using just a horizontal horizon line and a vanishing point. If you want to toy around with doing street lights, you would just maybe do a little circle here. If you wanted to toy around with moving your vanishing point over here and seeing how that changes things, and again, maybe moving the horizon line up to see how it changes the perspective. Just try different things and experiment and have fun with it, okay? Okay, now we're gonna start our atmospheric perspective project. And essentially, the way we're gonna create space in this drawing is less about the lines and more about the different types of colors we're going to use as we go back in space. And the rule is basically that with atmospheric perspective, as you go back in space, things become bluer and bluer, and they become less and less dark and less colorful. So if you notice here, we have like bright greens, and as you go back, you start to lose the greens, and it starts to become more blue, and it also starts to become less dark. So this is an actual photograph that I just decided to draw lines on so that I could create the drawing that I wanted to do. Another way of doing it is with paint, where you can create the lines you want, and essentially you can just use one color, blue, and then also add white, and as you go back you just add more and more white until you get to the back. Since I'm using colored pencils and not paint, we're gonna just start out with a piece of paper that we draw lines on, and you can draw the lines wherever you want. I use that photo as inspiration, but you can go outside and you can use nature as inspiration, or you can find a photo of some mountains or some hills. It all works the same, and you can use that as inspiration to create the lines you want. But the lines really aren't that important. You can make the lines however you want, and as long as you follow the rules of the colors, then it will start to appear as if things are receding in space. And so what I did was I toned the paper, all of the mountains I toned with this light blue, just to create that atmospheric feel. And I also wanted to tone the paper just for time's sake, as well as because it's a good practice to have. When you're using colored pencil or even just pencil, you should always tone your paper, because colored pencil builds up. As you start adding more, it becomes darker and darker, and so the more you can tone at the beginning before you really start changing the colors, you can just end up starting with the same color from the beginning instead of white. And so I'm going to start in the front. I'm going to use this image here as inspiration, and I know you can't see the whole thing, but that's okay. I'm going to just be looking at it. So with the very front, I'm going to use like more vivid colors because it's closer to us, and I'm just gonna essentially scribble because there's gonna be more variation in this layer, and you can go all the way to the edge of wherever you decided the edge of that color should be. And only in this front layer am I going to use green. Maybe the next one too I might use a little green, and maybe this third one I might use a little green, but I'll use less and less green and more blue as I go back. And the idea is not to be precious with it. You don't have to make it perfect. It's more about just creating depth and darkness with that color. And so on the next layer, another thing you can do with colored pencil is you can vary how hard you're pressing. So if I'm pressing really hard, I'm getting really dark, deep colors. And as I go back, I'm not gonna press as hard. Once I get to the back, I won't be pressing hard at all. I'll just be pressing really lightly to just get a little bit of color. I also need to tell you that when you start, it's good to start with a dark green, a light green, a dark blue, and a light blue, and you might even use a little bit of black and white, but I don't know if I'm going to use that yet. So okay, so the next layer I'm going to do a little bit more green. I might use a little bit of dark green too, but I'm not going to use this bright green anymore. That's only for the front layer, because that's one of those colors that you lose really fast as you go back in space. So now I'm only going to use the dark green, and I'm not going to press quite as hard either. You can also kind of look at your picture or at the image at the space you're looking at, and decide where you want to have like the implied trees and things, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so for the next one, I'm only going to put a little bit of green, and I'm going to even press even lighter, and I need another. You're going to need a good pencil sharpener with this because it's going to use up a lot of your pencil. So on this one, that's not even the right green I want to use. Here's a better dark green. On this one, I'm using some more dark green, but I'm not going to use nearly as much of it. I'm gonna use a little bit, and I'm gonna start adding in some dark blue. Because as it goes back, it becomes bluer and bluer. Let's do a little bit of dark blue, because on the next layers, we're not gonna use any green at all. It's always good to accentuate the lines. That'll help kind of create that division of space too. And you can start seeing how things divide up. So back here, I'm just gonna use a little bit of dark blue, and I'm gonna press really lightly. And this mountain right here is about the same distance as this one, so I'm gonna make them be the same tonality, the same colors. I'm gonna make this one a little darker just to create some contrast. The other reason I'm doing it like this is because in the picture I'm using as inspiration, that particular mountain is in the shade, but these ones back here are not, so. I'm gonna make this one a little bit darker too, a little bit greener. So as you can see, we're just building it up. And that's the nice thing about colored pencils, is they're very forgiving. So if you're like, oh no, I made that one too much one color, then just start layering new colors on top and it'll start to take over and change a little bit. So now we might do a little bit more blue, dark blue in this one, but essentially we're not gonna do as much at all. We might just accentuate the top line and that's it. And then we'll start to add in this light blue. We might need to add the light blue over here on this one as a little bit darker. Because that's kind of the problem with starting out with a lightly toned paper, is everything is white to begin with and it starts to become too light. So now this one's a little bit lighter, not much. And then the next one is even lighter. And then what we can do when we start to get back here is we can start to erase a little bit. So, you know, I made those lines really dark, but as they get further back, they're not going to be quite so dark. So I'm actually going to erase some of the tonality, some of the toning of the paper on these last few edges, just so you can see. So we'll make this one a little bit darker. This is part of this one here. It's actually part of this one. And then lastly, I think I did really light stuff right here. We're gonna just erase as good as we can this last line, because it's basically fading into the sky. You can barely see where the mountain meets the sky. So that's basically it, and you can keep building up the contrast in these layers. That's the beautiful thing about colored pencil, and you can have a lot of fun with it and adding. You might even decide, you know, up here you want to actually differentiate with trees, and so in the foreground you can really use a lot of contrast because, you know, these things are closer to you, and so the further back you go, you don't want to draw like a tree that's really defined way back here. I mean, you wouldn't be able to see that. It would be too far away. A tree would look more like just a little, you know, little balls when you get further back, and then back here they don't even look like trees anymore. And so, but in the foreground you can start to create like trees, happy little trees, as Bob Ross says. And by the way, if you've never seen Bob Ross, you should really try to find some videos. He is the master of atmospheric perspective. He can do some really cool landscape drawings and make some really neat stuff, and he's just really kind and fun to listen to too. So there you have it. We've done a atmospheric perspective using this photograph as inspiration. But I want to encourage you to just get out and try to create your own, and even challenge you to try to pull in some atmospheric perspective into your linear perspective drawing. Perhaps you would put some mountains in the background using this same method. There you have it. Now get outside and start drawing, and make sure to share your drawings with us using the hashtag PlaySafeInFay. Thanks. See ya.